also want to talk about film with you and the James Bond experience.
Yes, the Broccolis were watching me play, and they had tested over several hundred people for the role. They didn't fail. They came up with the right person. They asked if I would do a screen test. And I said to myself, you know what? Who can say they worked at Pinewood Studios in the morning and played at Wimbledon in the afternoon? We all felt, traumatized by a loss, And then, of course, when you go out in public, they remind you of it. And they tell you, how could you lose that match? You were leading. You destroyed me and my family. We were watching you till the cows come home. And and only if you worked a little bit harder, you could have won that match, Those kinds of things come at you. And even to this day, 30, 40 years later, people are reminded of matches that
were lost.
Trying to get over it is where today we have a lot of those mental issues that have taken a hold of sport. So many people with mental health issues and so on from sport, because it is the highest risk startup ever that I've ever seen. It's been the greatest privilege and honor to have represented India for such a long period of time, because wherever I played, the flag was flown. Wherever I played, the anthem was sung. And that feeling can never ever leave you for the rest of your life. I've lived overseas for 45 years, but I still carry my Indian passport.
You haven't given that up?
No, I'm Indian, and I will always be Indian. It's a feeling that is within me, and it can never go away. Everyone has an inbuilt resilience in them, and a determination, a dedication, a discipline, a desire that is burning in there, and we just have to find it. Male, female, young or old, it doesn't matter, and you can find it at any time. Muhammad Ali and I were appointed by Kofi Annan when we worked together as messenger of peace for the UN. He said, the service you do for others on earth is the rent you pay for a room in heaven. Since independence, collectively, we have won less medals than one American athlete.
Yeah.
One guy has won more than all of us put together since independence.
Yeah.
The commitment from the athlete needs to be total. Forget about your friends, forget about your education, forget about your family, forget about everything that you like in life. And when you're 17 years old, boy or girl, you can't have another girlfriend or boyfriend.
Hello and welcome to the Young Turks Reloaded podcast. I'm Shereen Bhan, and it is my absolute pleasure to welcome the legendary Vijay Amritraj onto the program, inducted into the International Tennis Hall of Fame in 2024, a man who's always had, in his words, India at the forefront. Mr. Amritraj, what an absolute pleasure. Thanks so much for joining us here on CNBC-TV18, and that's where I want to start. Okay. You said in your acceptance speech when you were inducted into the Tennis Hall of Fame that it was an impossible story from a boy from Chennai in the 1950s to go on to do what you did. As you look back today, what do you think made it possible?
Well, first and foremost, it's always been my parents. I've always said my greatest talent was being born to the right parents. And I was ill growing up. I had issues with my lungs and my breathing capability. I was in and out of hospital frequently, and I've had IVs in me for a period of time, all kinds of medication. But eventually, eventually the issue that the doctors brought up was for him to play an outdoor sport. Let your son play an outdoor sport to open up the lungs and be healthy so you can actually go to school. I wasn't a particularly good student at all. I've always made the joke that for one set of school fees, my mother and I were both educated. And she used to go sit in class for me often enough and take notes and come and teach me in a hospital. And so for me, everything was them. They're the ones who made this happen. They are the ones who kind of didn't want me left behind. My mother was the one who literally did my homework for me, literally did everything for me, and eventually ran 50 yards, 100 yards, 200 yards, driving the car by the side of me on the road, and eventually running 8-10 miles by the time I was 15 years old, and put me on a level playing field with others. And then from a very young age, my first overseas trip was before my 14th birthday. So it sort of happened very quickly. By 17, 18, I was India's best, Asia's best, and then by 19, I was in the world's top 10. So it came fairly quickly. And the next thing I knew, I was a professional tennis player. I wanted to be a doctor.
Really?
Yes, I wanted to be a doctor. I think it's a glorious profession. It's the ability to save lives, make a difference in people's homes and people's families, and do the right thing.
And you ended up with serve and volley.
Exactly, literally.
But of course, your parents had a part to play in how you started. But finishing is a different story altogether. And that's what I want to talk to you about, the athlete's mindset. And, when you spoke earlier this morning, you said that in sport, there's black and white. There's winning or losing,
Yes.
and there's nothing in between.
Yes.
Now, to get your mind adjusted to that idea, because then what are you doing in the middle? I mean, on the days that you lose, then how do you pick yourself up and move forward?
Well, first and foremost, that the clarity in sport is not in real life. You have to understand that first when you leave a sport, and that's why it becomes very difficult for any athlete in any sport for that matter. When he's done with his or her career, and they come off of it into the real life, the whole world is grey. Whenever two people have an argument, there are three opinions. So you have to get used to that mindset. Whereas if you and I play a game and you play well, you win, I play well, I win.
And that's that.
That's the end of conversation.
Yeah.
I go on to play the next round in my tournament. So we've never been used to that fact. For having played on the tour for 22 years and Davis Cup for nearly 20 years, by the way, it's been the greatest privilege and honor to have represented India for such a long period of time, because wherever I played, the flag was flown. Wherever I played, the anthem was sung. And that feeling can never, ever leave you for the rest of your life. And it's always been in me. And that's the way I've tried to guide my own life as I move forward. But in real life, everything is grey. And then I went into the movie business, and you think you did a performance that was outstanding. Oh, well, the lighting wasn't good, the script wasn't right, this wasn't there, and that wasn't there, and the director shot. So many things that can go amiss. So I think that's a mindset that you have to get your arms around. But coming back to what you said...
How did you get your arms around that big transition, that big change?
Very tough. That's the difficult part, because you're used to one section of your entire life that guided you in the initial stage of growing up. And the winning and losing was straightforward. And needless to say, you lost more than you won. And that's what mostly happens. That's why the wins taste so good. And the defeats are like Death Valley. But trying to get over it is where today we have a lot of those mental issues that have taken a hold of sport today. And now it's a question of actually trying to manage that situation properly. You have so many people with mental health issues and so on from sport, because it is the highest risk startup ever that I've ever seen.
Why do you say that?
Because unfortunately, there isn't a guarantee. You can flood it with money, you can flood it with all kinds of talented people to help you, you can do all kinds of things, but at the end of the day, it's like getting the horse to the water. You just can't force the horse to drink. And so I always said to my kids, when my son wanted to play tennis, and wanted to play tennis on the professional tour, I said two things, the good news and bad news. The good news is I'm your dad. The bad news is I'm your dad.
So he would have always had that hyphenated existence.
It is. And I can teach you to play good tennis, but it's very difficult to teach that person to win. It has to come from within. And if you don't, you work at it, and you work at it, and you work at it, till you get that opportunity to be able to win.
But who taught you to win, or what made you desire winning? Because I go back to an anecdote that you narrated where you talked about this Davis Cup match where you were basically told that, look, you're done for if you continue to play, and you're going to end up in the ICU. And you said, no, I'm going to play this out. And you went on to eventually win that match. What made you believe you had the right to win?
Well, I think it's part of life, truly. For me, that match was not just a tennis match. It was a life journey for me. For me, every match that was a tough one, win or lose, and how you take it, has never been a tennis match. It has always been something you learn as a life experience. My mother had 2 near-fatal accidents when she was in her 30s. And she came out of it with incredible time in hospital and all kinds of difficulties. And I won't bore you with the details, but they told her you couldn't do this and you couldn't do that and you couldn't do this and you couldn't do that, and she did all of it so I could play. And when you see that under the circumstances, you always think it's improbable but not impossible. And so when you get into that mode of thinking where the human spirit goes beyond what you can possibly expect of yourself, that's when you're on the verge of touching greatness. In anything that you do, and in sport it's clearer, because you can come off that giving it your all, and you might not win. Now where do you go from there? So you have to get down and then pick yourself up again to be able to push you up. And you need a good team around you, meaning family, friends, or someone who can actually keep everything real for you. And then, of course, you do your hard work and you follow through with everything that you're supposed to be doing. But at the end of it all, for me, tennis was only my life's journey. It taught me about myself. It taught me who I am. It taught me what I can do and how I can ask more of myself to make me better and to make the people I deal with better.
You know, you talked about the fact that we're going through this period where we're seeing competing athletes today, including tennis, talk openly about their mental health issues, deal with their mental health issues. You know, I'm sure that you probably didn't talk about it, but it wasn't as if it didn't exist when you were playing and you were on the tour. How did you cope with that? And what do you believe is the way forward as we talk about what's happening today?
You're absolutely right. And I think there's so many things at an early age that we didn't discuss. Maybe not for want of it being made public, or not for want of...
But there was a stigmatization to being vulnerable, right?
Yes. The simple answer is yes. But I think you also didn't quite understand what it was. You know, we all felt, traumatized by a loss. You know, and then of course when you go out in public, they remind you of it. And they tell you, how could you lose that match? You know, you were leading. You know, you destroyed me and my family. We were watching you till the cows come home. And and only if you worked a little bit harder, you could have won that match. You know, those kinds of things come at you. And even to this day, 30, 40 years later, people are reminded of matches that
were lost.
That were lost. Exactly. So I look at it and I keep thinking to myself, you know, when they actually get very emotional about it, people do get very emotional about it. And I always say, people, when did you slap the guy? And well, not quite. I think he was doing it, or she was doing it, because they were passionate about the way I played, and they were passionate about my winning. And that's the reason they were very much a part of my growing up. So even in my Hall of Fame speech, when I said, you know, from the Lubbock, Texas, and Des Moines, Iowa, and all from the little towns to the big cities, you know, the Indians were in my corner, morning, noon, and night. And they made sure I won.
Yes. And you called it the India Day all over again.
Yes.
But what does India mean to you today? You know, you've built a life. You've been outside of India for over 4 decades now. So what does India, as you look at it today, mean to you?
Well, it is more than anything else. It's a feeling, and I think that feeling comes from probably repetition of wherever you're playing, the flag flown and the anthem sung. And every time that happens, every time to this day that it happens, it gives me goosebumps. And I've lived overseas for 45 years, but I still carry my Indian passport.
You haven't given that up?
No.
Why not?
Because I'm Indian, and I will always be Indian. So it's a feeling that is within me, and it can never go away. Not, you know, I don't say it in a good way or a bad way or an indifferent way or anything like that. I'm just saying it in a way that it's in me, that it's in my heart, and it's my feeling of what people did for me when I represented the flag in public on a tennis court. And I used to go, if I go 80% of my way, they would get me 20%. And they always did. They always pushed me over the edge because of how they were in my corner to push me over the edge. And not just in India. I'm talking about little towns and big cities across the world where I got a chance to play. And this is people who are wealthy, who could afford a ticket, and people who couldn't afford a ticket and still coming to the matches to make sure I could win. And those are the moments that make you even more Indian than you think you are.
You know, it was interesting what your son said when he was speaking at the Hall of Fame ceremony, and he said that you made ordinary Indians, Indian immigrants especially, feel a sense of belonging, feel a sense of accomplishment almost as if they were sharing in your glory, and gave them a sense of confidence that they could do it too, gave them a reason to dream and a reason to believe. Did you realize that you had that kind of impact on people?
I didn't know it at the time till they told me, meaning when I was 18, 19 years old. At 19 years old, I'm playing on the center court at the US Open, and first Indian on American television ever in any walk of life. And people telling me across the country and other parts of the world that they're a resident in a hospital, writing these letters to me. They're a resident in a hospital, and the chief of the hospital wouldn't give them time of day till he saw me play. And then he looked for him, looked for her, and found them to say how much they thought of me when they met me. Either whether the kids, I signed their autograph or took pictures or whatever. In 19, 20, 21, that's a young age to be faced with that. And then I went on from there and there and there and there and there, where what it did for an Indian in small towns and big cities was so powerful that it made me feel like I had literally had to win more, not just for me, you know. And it was not just the winning and losing, but it's also the way we carried ourselves overseas, and the importance of, one look at me, I will always be Indian, irrespective of where I live. It's not getting away from it.
Yes.
Okay, so I feel so solid and secure and happy and thrilled about it.
Today,
yes.
But back then, at 19, when you were on the tour,
yes.
you know, and we still, I mean, kids still deal with a sense of not feeling like they belong.
Yes.
How did you cope with that?
I think also in those days it was even more unique because there was not that many of us overseas, you know, and I was looking for Indian restaurants in every little town to be able to eat at. And in those days, we didn't have the Indian restaurants like we have across today, right? Yeah. So I would see an Indian on the street corner, and I would run up to him and say, I'm coming to your house for dinner tonight. You know, and I've sat on the floor with young couples with babies on their lap and eating dal and roti on the floor with them and seeing their growth. So for me, as I said in my speech, you know, their growth was my growth, and both our growth together was India's growth.
But from an Indian perspective today, as you look at what's happening with Indian sport, and you know, let's keep cricket aside.
Sure.
But what's exciting you about what's going on with the way that we've managed to, you know, win more medals now at the Olympics, the aspiration to host the Olympics perhaps in 2036? You know, what is exciting you about the Indian sports scene today as an observer?
Well, first of all, it has taken 40, 50 years to change to some degree, the mindset. The biggest concern for me has always been the mindset. The mindset is, I have two kids, 7 and 9. They want to play sport, but you know, can we give up everything in the kitchen sink and take a second mortgage on the house to put them into sport? No sane family would do that. The risk is too great. Why would you kill this child's life? So you go to school, you go to college, you get a job, you get married, you do your thing, and you're very happy. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. But what happens to the sport? So that's why I find it incredibly, not bizarre, but interesting to see that, 28 of our top 100 CEOs in the world are Indian now?
Yeah.
But we don't have anybody in the world's top 100 in tennis, right? So how do we get there? It's a mindset. It's a mindset for sport because it is such a high-risk venture that it's very hard to put everything in the kitchen sink into that particular profession. And that's a very hard thing to follow. And that's why we don't have the kinds of accolades and wins that we should have for a country of our size and interest in sport.
What can change that? Do you believe that capital is is one of the big constraints, one of the big problems, creating a safety net? I mean, what will change that?
Culture first. Society and culture. And it is changing. There's no question. I mean, we have a spectacular force in the workforce today who are young entrepreneurs. Everybody doesn't become a doctor, lawyer, engineer anymore, right? The startups are huge. It's the world's largest country for startups, right? The money that's flowing from every part of the world and the ventures that are putting money into startups are huge. Okay, if that's the case, in my last point today, I said, listen, invest in sport, right? Why is that? What do you get from it? What, with the very good chance of that child who starts off playing sports at 10, 11, 12, by 15 years old, he'll be done. Now what? And that's most likely to happen. For every 10,000 of those happenings, you may get one guy that comes out of it, or one girl that comes out of it. That's the unique part of it. We don't have that many Vishy Anands. We don't have that many Neeraj Chopras. We don't have that many Mary Combs. We do have a whole bunch of wonderful badminton success in girls and boys, which I find fantastic. Okay? But that's about it. Collectively in individual sports, since independence, collectively, we have won less medals than one American athlete. One guy has won more than all of us put together since independence. How do we take that? So I just find it amusing because we don't pay enough attention to sport professionally. This is if we want to compete. If you want to compete with the world and you want to go after... Similarly with wanting to host the 2036 Olympic Games. I think that's wonderful. India hosting the 2036 Olympic Games would show the world who we are in a way that has no filter, right? And there is no hospitality in the world, in a country, better than us, by a long shot. I have been and I've traveled, and I've stayed in the best places, and I've stayed in the worst places. And our hospitality, because of its people, of our people, is nothing short of paradise. Okay, that's a given. But we cannot afford to host the Olympic Games unless we are willing to be guaranteed a spot in the top 5 of the medal count. Otherwise, it's not worth it.
From where we are to 2030, it's not a long way off.
No, it's not. It's not. It's 10 years out. 10 years is a very short span of time to try to create anything. Especially a champion. Oh, you can create a software. Yes, you can. When they were talking about AI today, I was thinking to myself, we might be better off creating an artificial Indian. That might be our best shot.
That probably might be the best shot at this point in time. So changing the mindset, creating a culture, investing in sport. Who does the heavy lifting there? The government, the private sector? Who does the heavy lifting?
The government creates policy, right? No question. I think the government truly has bigger fish to fry. I mean, we continue to work on clean water and sanitation and healthcare and Medicare for everyone in the country, and make sure that every child can read and write, and to go into the rural areas and do all of that. That is by far number one. There's no question. But the corporates in the country who are all doing well, let's pick the top 100, for example, and I've said this on numerous occasions. If every CEO in the country tells the government that he's going to allocate this much money to a sport of his choice, okay, and he gets the deduction for it and the write-offs and whatever else the government can help with. Not the government putting in the money, it's the corporates putting in the money. And 100 companies put it, whatever the minimum is to be able to get that deduction. I have no doubt in my mind that they'll do it. You take 80% of that money and put it into sport of their choice. The balance 20% goes into a blind pool. Okay? So 100 companies, 200 companies do this. The blind pool is fairly large. So let's say 8 out of 10 decide to pick cricket, or 7 out of 10 decide to pick cricket. The other 3 are picking, let's say it's tennis, football, and something else, right? Which is fine. But 80% of it goes into their choice, and 20% of it goes into a blind pool. Now, you've got something that you can work with, to buying the best of any kind of tutoring that you need. Everything, from dietitians to trainers to everything that goes along with the family that needs to make this athlete. Okay, that still doesn't do anything for the athlete. Okay, now the commitment from the athlete needs to be total.
Yeah.
So total, forget about your friends, forget about your education, forget about your family, forget about everything that you like in life. And when you're 17 years old, boy or girl, you can't have another girlfriend or boyfriend. That's it. Your commitment is entirely to your success, so that we're going to see the tricolor flying. That's the only goal in your life. Okay? That's hard. It's very hard. Now, this is all barring injury. You know, injury happens all day long.
Yeah.
Today, I'm injured in every part of my body. And I need to be able to sleep on the floor at various great hotels because of my back. And you don't realize that till your career is over.
Yeah.
Okay, we risk everything at that time because it's worth it, right? Now, to do all that, then you've done the maximum of what you can do. Now, the last piece of that puzzle is to make sure that if he or she does not make it at the highest level, that he or she is protected with a backup of a good job, good life in society.
So a safety net.
Absolutely.
So the blind pool essentially goes on to create not just the enabling ecosystem and the environment, but eventually also the safety.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And let's try it. Let's try it, see what happens. You know, and I feel fairly confident that from the areas, and frankly, most of our talented kids are from the rural areas and from the smaller cities and towns. I think we will have a good shot if we really give it a push, a real push. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. Everything is out there. Everything is, it's been done a million times. Okay, and we've seen it firsthand. I was there when Carl Lewis ran in '88. I carried the Olympic torch at the '88 Games. I know what it is. I know that feeling. So when we say tennis has changed today to what it was when I played, yes, tennis has changed, the court has changed, the balls have changed, the racket has changed. But the one thing that hasn't changed is the feeling at 4, 5, 15, 30. That has not changed. And that will remain forever.
That will remain forever.
Yes.
You had an opportunity to spend time with Donald Trump and interview him as well for many hours. What do you make of what's going on in the US, and specifically from an Indian immigrant's perspective? How do you see the Trump administration and its actions and the likely impact?
Well, obviously, it would be one thing we know for sure, and that is, he loves shaking up the status quo. Which, nothing wrong with that. People come in, they change, they change the sheets, they change the curtains, they change everything in your house when they come in, especially to the people's house in America, which is the White House. So when you look at someone like this, he's not the norm. He's never been in politics. He never run for public office. The only thing he's ever done was run for president. And when I spoke to him, it was right before he ran for president in
his first term.
In the first term. And needless to say, it's a completely different second term would be for him, because he comes in with more thinking. He's been there, done that, and I think this is the way to do it. But at the end of the day, let's not forget all his background. He's been a real estate mogul. He's made deals his whole life. He thinks there's everything is the art of the deal, and so on and so forth. And when you talk to him as well, that's the feeling you would get, as you did as well. So I think for me to see what he's done, and putting all the people around him also, but it's one way of thinking. You need some pushback, so you do need a good opposition as well to be able to help make a conversation meaningful, right? But coming back to the immigrant visa issue, I think from his perspective, he's looking for excellence, and it can come from anywhere, because he wants America, in his words, great again. And I think when you look at it and you look at what others can bring to the table, I mean, look, we have a guy who would never have dreamt of Indian origin to be head of the FBI, and the ATF at this point, acting director of the ATF. You have we have 5 or 6 members of Congress, obviously. We have others who have served in office in the Biden administration. Just brilliant people. So I think he's looking for the best people to actually make a difference to what he has to offer from the US. Plus also, yes, I think stated clearly that if someone goes and studies in America, they should be given a green card once they finish their education, right off the bat. So those are all positive signs as to where people might want to go. Now, I'm not saying every Indian needs to go away and study elsewhere, but I think as long as everyone does what they need to do to be able to help India and the relationship with the new place they're living in work well together, which is where I think also Indiaspora comes in a big way, is to bring people together. This is because you know more about where you came from and you know more about the people you're living in the community with. I think makes a big difference, and it can help.
You know, I also want to talk about film with you and the James Bond experience.
Yes.
So
how fun was that?
You tell us. You tell us.
Yeah, I got picked off the center court at Wimbledon to do a screen test way back when, and the Broccolis were watching me play, and they had tested over several hundred people for the role. They didn't fail. They came up with the right person. They asked if I would do a screen test, and I said to myself, you know what? Who can say they worked at Pinewood Studios in the morning and played at Wimbledon in the afternoon?
Not many.
Not many. So I did it for a laugh. They loved it. They signed me for 14 weeks. I did the picture. It was one of the most fun things I ever did. And after the Bond picture, I did a Star Trek movie. I did a television series of my own, the first on American television, both a sitcom as well as an action comedy. And there were a lot of us in that industry as well. And it was a true eye-opener for me as to how movies are actually made and what goes into it to create 1 minute of film.
Yes, a lot goes into creating 1 minute of film. So if not tennis, do you think that perhaps this could have been the second leg of your career?
Well, the great, legendary Amitabh Bachchan and I talked about it, so... He posted a fantastic story the other day where he was mistaken for me, and he tells the story so well. He tells it better than I do. But great guy. I love the guy, and but I think the simple thing is that I love the world of make-believe. The great thing about movie making is that you get yourself immersed into another character, and the question is, how well can you do it? How well can you play it? And that's why when you do pictures of other people, you know, whether it's Meryl Streep playing Margaret Thatcher, or so on and so forth, it's just awesome when you look back at the reality of the situation and see.
Who would Vijay Amritraj like to play?
Who would I like to play?
Yes.
Oh,
which character would you like to get into?
Gosh, it's hard to pick a character to do it, but lots of movies that, great people that have been played, whether it's all the way back with Kingsley playing Gandhi to Morgan Freeman playing Mandela. And I don't know if you saw the movie Invictus, another one of my favorite pictures, where in fact Mandela says specifically, all of us have to exceed our own expectations to make South Africa great. And I think that goes the same for the world where we live in today, and the issues that we've had in the world. I think all of us as individuals have to exceed our own expectations to make humanity work. So if you look at the way that these people make a difference, whether it was Martin Luther King, whether it's Mahatma Gandhi, whether it's so many great individuals who come out of India that have made such a difference to the way we think, and Tagore, and just a whole slew of them. You know how difficult it must be to play them, to get into their heads, to be able to think what they were thinking?
Okay, easier question. Who would you like to play you?
Good one. Good one. The easiest answer would probably be one of my sons.
Yeah.
Because they know me through and through. And you really need to know the person, and it's very hard to learn so much about the person. And how do you do it? And I always felt that. And when you see these great movies that were made for Ford versus Ferrari, and the inner fights that they would be having with playing those characters, which is why for me Meryl Streep was is magic. just magic.
Yeah.
I mean, she can get in and out of other people in her head and heart in a way that I've never seen anyone else do it.
Well, back to cricket.
Yes.
And you talked about the disappointment of not seeing anyone break into the top 10. Do you believe that we're anywhere closer to being able to find the next big Indian hope as far as tennis is concerned?
I think it's fair to say that we have fallen back to some extent because we used to be clearly the number one country in Asia, and we're not now. When I played tournaments in the old days, people were disappointed when I didn't win the tournament. And today we don't have one who is in the tournament. So we've lost a lot of that cachet at the moment, and I think we have to restart that to be able to get back to where we think we should be. India being in Group 2 in a Davis Cup match, I think is not something that we can look at and say we're a tennis country. We can't do that. We need to be able to get back to Group 1, then we have to get back in the world group. We belong as a country in the world group, and we have a long way to go before we get there.
So, the greatest of all times?
In tennis? Well, I played through several generations.
Yes.
And so if you go back and you look at records, obviously, the great Rod Laver won the 2 Grand Slams. He's the only one who won 2 Grand Slams. And I was fortunate to play against him, and so on and so forth.
You beat him.
I did. I've had several wins against him. But you're coming back to today's environment of where we've seen these big three win so much. To imagine that those 3 guys won as much as they did in the Grand Slams, and they all played in the same era, is hard for me to get my arms around. And having been in that sport for 25 years, So I think when you look at it, I'm just happy to say, like we saw in that movie Troy, I'm glad I lived during the time of Achilles.
Yes, but the memory that you have of a match that you played that has been an everlasting one, that's taught you not just about tennis, but it's taught you left you with a life lesson, perhaps.
Yes, several of them. Obviously, the one I've talked about a lot about Davis Cup and things, and there was one match against Argentina which is very specific. But again, if I had to pick 3 matches that sort of told the story of my life and what it meant, the first would have been winning a major college tournament in southern India as a schoolboy. And I was 13 and a half, and the guy I beat in the final was 19 at medical college. And it was the middle of May, summer in Chennai, and we were playing best of 5 sets. And I lost the first 2 and came back to win in 5. And the next day, there was the ugliest picture of me in the newspaper. And we still have that. That was the first one. The second one was when after injuries, I ended up winning the National Championships of India for the first time. And it was a memorable weekend in Calcutta during the Christmas of 1972. And singles and doubles over 2 days, 19 sets in 2 days at the age of 18. And that made me the best in India and then the best in Asia. And then following year, beating Laver on the center court at the US Open, live on CBS, which nobody had seen this Indian guy come from nowhere to put India on the map. And that put me on the international map. And it put India on the international map in the Open era. And I think what it did was it just brought Indians closer and closer and closer together as I traveled the world for the next 20 years playing at the highest level of sport. So for me, it has been a journey that is not, has transcended tennis, of course, but more than anything else, it put me there for a purpose. And I hope I lived up to it.
Well, you're in the Tennis Hall of Fame. You've done much more than just living up to that, Mr. Amritraj. But let me end by asking you, and I think this is important for everybody who's watching, and especially young athletes who are probably looking at building a professional career for themselves. Resilience. How do you build it? Where do you find it? What's the mantra for you?
Well, over a period of time, it comes from within. I think there's something that we all have that we have to find. And everyone is talented in something. Everyone has an inbuilt resilience in them and a determination, a dedication, a discipline, a desire that is burning in there, and we just have to find it. Male, female, young or old, it doesn't matter, and you can find it at any time. And strangely, you find it in the weirdest forms, and you find it at a time when you least expect it. And these are the ones that you truly have to grasp and hold on to and make it work for you. And in sport, again, it's black and white. In real life, it's difficult. When you hit those moments, and you have to go back in your inner self. For me, it was always when they told my mother she couldn't do something, she did it. And it always remained in me, and it has always remained with me today, and hopefully some part of it has gone on to my boys. And so when we look at ourselves and we say, somebody says can't, I find that a very odd word, because it really means you won't. So you find it within yourself. It comes in every walk of life. It can come in marriages, it can come in with parents, grandparents, grandchildren, it can come across the board. And at that point in time, you've fallen down. Now, you better get up. You have to get up. Ali said that, and then you are able to help others do it as well. And he said it very poignantly when we worked together as a messenger of peace for the UN. Muhammad Ali and I were appointed by Kofi Annan alongside Luciano Pavarotti and Michael Douglas, the actor, and so on. And he said, the service you do for others on earth is the rent you pay for a room in heaven. And those are powerful things that you can't just let go. It's got to touch you somewhere. And then I think those kinds of moments make you a better person, and resilience comes out of it.
Well, Vijay Amritraj, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Young Turks Reloaded podcast. We wish you the very best of luck with everything else that you intend to do. And thank you for making an impact on so many lives. It's been an absolute pleasure to speak with you.
Thank you so much. And you're absolutely terrific in doing interviews.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Well, with that, it is time for us to wrap up this edition of the Young Turks Reloaded podcast. From all of us here on the team for now, goodbye. Many thanks for watching. We'll see you again shortly. Stay tuned to CNBC-TV18.